Modern America needs acres of land and tons of machines to survive. The Amish, they feed huge families using just 1/8 acre. No chemicals, no tech, no struggle. Their gardens are small, but their harvests never run out. Here's the blueprint of how they do more with less. Growing multiple crops in the exact same space sounds impossible until you watch the Amish do it season after season on plots smaller than most suburban lawns. Their 3-level system uses every dimension of the garden, not just the flat surface that most people focus on. Tall corn stalks rise up first, creating natural shade for beans planted at their base. Those beans climb the corn like a living trellis, while simultaneously pulling nitrogen from the air and feeding it directly into the soil through their roots. Meanwhile, down below, where most folks forget to look, carrots and other root vegetables push deep into the earth, occupying an entirely different layer that would otherwise sit empty and useless. The corn gets support and nutrients, the beans get a place to climb, and the carrots get the underground real estate all to themselves. On top of all this vertical planning, squash vines spread across the surface like a living mulch blanket, their broad leaves shading out weeds and keeping moisture locked in the soil. Some modern gardeners plant 1 tomato per square foot and call it intensive, while the Amish are running a 3-story vegetable apartment complex in the same space. Every single inch of soil serves multiple purposes at once, which is why Amish families can pull massive harvests from gardens that look almost too small to matter. The efficiency becomes even more impressive when you consider water usage. The dense plantings create their own shade layer that reduces evaporation dramatically compared to sparse gardens with exposed soil between plants. This approach can genuinely triple your food output per square foot compared to traditional row planting where everything sits spread out with bare dirt between. The corn grows tall and produces ears up high, the beans wrap around producing pods at mid-level, the squash sprawls producing fruit across the ground, and the carrots develop completely underground. 4 different crops occupying 4 different zones, all in the same plot at the same time. The timing of planting matters tremendously because you need the corn established before the beans go in, otherwise the beans have nothing to climb. The whole system depends on understanding how plants interact with each other rather than competing. Companion planting isn't just some hippie gardening trend. It's practical science that the Amish figured out through generations of careful observation. The beauty of this system extends beyond just maximizing space. Each plant actively improves conditions for the others, creating a self-sustaining micro-ecosystem within your garden. The corn's tall structure provides wind protection for the more delicate bean flowers, ensuring better pollination rates and higher yields. The squash leaves don't just shade the soil, they also create a humid microclimate underneath that benefits the shallow root systems of all 3 companion plants. This moisture retention becomes critical during dry spells when conventional gardens require constant watering. The deep roots of the corn break up compacted soil layers that shallow-rooted plants could never penetrate, effectively tilling the ground naturally while growing food. A farmer once tried planting his corn, beans, and squash in separate fields because he liked things organized, then spent all summer wondering why his Amish neighbor's messy-looking garden produced twice as much food. The nitrogen fixation from bean roots means you're actually improving your soil while growing food, not depleting it like conventional single-crop systems do. This matters enormously over time because soil that gets richer each year requires less space to produce the same amount of food. The shallow-rooted squash, medium-rooted beans, and deep-rooted corn each pull nutrients from different soil depths, meaning they're not competing for the same resources even though they're crammed together. The large squash leaves create deep shade that keeps soil cool and moist during summer heat, reducing how much water you need to haul. The system essentially creates its own microclimate where plants help each other survive and thrive instead of fighting over limited resources. Understanding the seasonal timeline makes this system even more powerful. The corn gets direct planted as soon as soil temperatures reach 60 degrees, giving it a 2 to 3 week head start before bean seeds go in. This timing ensures the corn stalks are sturdy enough to support climbing beans without toppling over. The squash goes in last once both corn and beans are established because squash grows so aggressively it could overwhelm smaller seedlings. Watching this progression throughout the growing season reveals the genius of Amish observation. Early summer shows tall green corn with beans just beginning their climb. Midsummer displays beans flowering halfway up corn stalks while squash vines start spreading. Late summer brings mature ears of corn, pods heavy on bean vines, and squash fruits developing across the ground. Each crop reaches peak harvest at slightly different times, spreading out the work and the bounty. This is how you feed 8 or 10 people from a garden plot that most folks would call too small for even a hobby garden. The principles scale up or down perfectly, working just as well in a tiny urban backyard as on a quarter-acre homestead. But getting maximum food from limited space means nothing if you're growing the wrong things. Calorie-rich essentials form the backbone of Amish gardens, instead of the fancy heirloom varieties that show up in seed catalogs with romantic descriptions. Potatoes, beans, corn, and cabbage might not sound exciting to people scrolling through Instagram food photos, but these 4 crops alone can form the base of hundreds of different recipes throughout the entire year. The Amish plan their gardens around what will actually keep their families fed, rather than what looks pretty on a plate or sounds exotic at dinner parties. A 50-pound sack of potatoes provides serious sustenance in a way that a handful of cherry tomatoes simply cannot, no matter how sweet those tomatoes taste. Beans dried and stored properly deliver protein and calories month after month, while corn ground into meal becomes bread, porridge, mush, and dozens of other staples. Cabbage ferments into sauerkraut that lasts through winter and provides vitamins when nothing fresh is available. These aren't glamorous choices, but they represent food security in its most practical form. Somebody once suggested an Amish family should grow edible flowers for salads, and the reply was basically that flowers are lovely, but they don't fill bellies come February. The goal isn't variety first, it's making sure everyone eats well all year without depending on stores or supply chains that can fail. The Amish also understand that calorie-dense crops require less work overall because you need smaller quantities to meet nutritional needs. A pound of potatoes provides far more sustenance than a pound of lettuce, meaning less harvesting, less processing, and less storage space needed. By focusing on crops that grow exceptionally well in their specific local conditions, the Amish eliminate the waste that comes from babying plants that aren't suited to the region. A crop that thrives naturally requires less water, less attention, less fertilizer, and less space to produce the same amount of food as something struggling in the wrong climate. This efficiency matters tremendously when you're feeding 8 people from an eighth of an acre. The only product we'll ever promote on our channel is a book by Claude Davis, a veteran prepper, about 126 superfoods and preservation methods from crisis times like the Great Depression and wartime that are impossible to find elsewhere. We decided to promote his book because we are the last generation able to share these techniques and superfoods to our children or grandchildren. It would be a shame to see this information about highly nutritious foods and preservation methods to survive crises disappear. You can also find a book about herbal remedies from Nicole Apelian on their store. If you're watching this on TV, you can look up our channel, Frugal Solutions, on your phone or tablet and find the books by clicking the link in our channel description or any other video description. The Amish woman planning her garden thinks in terms of meals per square foot rather than how many different vegetables she can squeeze in. She knows exactly how many jars of beans her family needs to get through winter, how many pounds of potatoes they consume each month, how much cabbage turns into sauerkraut and coleslaw. This mathematical precision transforms gardening from a hobby into a calculated survival strategy. She can look at a garden plot and instantly calculate whether it will produce enough to meet her family's actual needs rather than just provide interesting variety. The planning happens during winter months when seed catalogs arrive, but instead of getting distracted by colorful photos of unusual vegetables, she's tallying up square footage required for the basics. Her calculations account for expected yields, storage losses, and even crop failures because she knows not everything grows perfectly every year. One fellow tried impressing his Amish neighbors by growing 17 types of exotic peppers, then realized too late that nobody in his family actually liked hot food enough to eat them. The math works beautifully when you plant what you'll actually use instead of what sounds interesting. 100 square feet of potatoes yields somewhere between 50 to 150 pounds, depending on conditions, which translates to real meals for real people over real time. That same space planted in decorative kale that nobody wants to eat produces nothing but compost material. The storage characteristics of these staple crops matter just as much as their growing requirements. Potatoes cure properly and store in cool, dark conditions for 6 months or longer without sprouting or rotting. Dried beans keep for years in sealed containers, actually improving in flavor as they age. Corn dried and ground into meal stays fresh for months, or whole kernels can be stored even longer. Winter cabbage varieties withstand frost and can stay in the ground well into late fall, or get harvested and fermented into sauerkraut that literally lasts years. These storage qualities mean the garden harvest extends far beyond the growing season, providing food security throughout the entire calendar year. The Amish approach recognizes that successful gardening isn't about showing off rare varieties. It's about consistent production of foods that store well and adapt to multiple cooking methods. Cabbage becomes coleslaw, sauerkraut, soup, stir-fry, and stuffed cabbage rolls. Potatoes turn into mashed, baked, fried, roasted, or added to soups and stews. Beans work in chili, baked beans, soup, succotash, or refried. Corn becomes cornbread, polenta, grits, tortillas, or eaten fresh. These versatile staples mean you're never bored, even though you're eating from a limited crop list. The culinary flexibility of these crops cannot be overstated. A single cabbage might appear boring sitting in the garden, but that cabbage becomes the foundation of a dozen different dishes across several months. The same goes for potatoes, which can be prepared hundreds of different ways to create completely different eating experiences from the exact same vegetable. This versatility maximizes the value of every square foot dedicated to these crops because each plant produces ingredients for countless meals rather than a single eating experience. The smartest crop choices in the world won't matter much if you can't afford to plant them year after year. Buying seeds every spring might seem normal to most gardeners, but the Amish rarely purchase anything they can produce themselves. Every harvest becomes the source of next year's planting, creating a continuous cycle that costs virtually nothing and ensures they're never waiting on mail orders or sold-out varieties. The practice keeps plants perfectly adapted to local conditions, because seeds saved from your own garden carry genetic information about surviving in your specific soil and climate. A tomato variety that's been grown in the same location for 20 years performs dramatically better than some fancy hybrid ordered from a catalog company 3 states away. Some folks treat seed catalogs like wish books and order 50 varieties they'll never plant, while the Amish are harvesting seeds from tomatoes they actually ate. This adaptation process happens naturally when you save seeds from your best performing plants year after year. The selection pressure works both ways too, as plants that can't handle local conditions simply fail to produce viable seeds, eliminating themselves from future generations automatically. The strongest, most disease-resistant, best-tasting individuals get selected naturally because those are the ones you choose to collect seeds from. After several generations, you've essentially created a custom variety that's optimized for your exact growing conditions. The selection process becomes almost unconscious over time because you naturally save seeds from the biggest tomatoes, the most productive bean plants, the sweetest corn. This ongoing selection creates vegetables that perform exceptionally well under the specific conditions of your garden, something no mail-order seed can match. The financial savings add up tremendously over time because seed packets now cost several dollars each, and a serious garden might need 20 or 30 different varieties. That's easily $100 or more spent annually on seeds, money that could buy tools or other supplies instead. The Amish method means a single tomato can provide next year's seed supply for an entire garden, since one fruit contains dozens or even hundreds of viable seeds. The same applies to beans, peas, lettuce, and most other common vegetables. You let a few plants go to seed at the end of the season, collect and dry the seeds properly, then store them in a cool, dry place until spring. The process takes minimal time and effort compared to the benefits it provides. The practical mechanics of seed saving are simpler than most people imagine. Tomato seeds get scooped out with the gel surrounding them, fermented in water for a few days to remove the gel coating, then rinsed and dried on paper plates. Bean and pea seeds simply dry on the plant until pods turn brown and brittle, then get shelled out and stored. Lettuce sends up tall seed stalks that produce thousands of tiny seeds easily collected by shaking mature seed heads into a bag. Corn requires more attention because varieties can cross-pollinate, but even that challenge gets managed through isolation distance or timing different varieties to pollinate at different times. Each vegetable has specific techniques, but none are particularly complicated once you learn the basics. Seed saving also creates food security that goes beyond just the current year. If stores run out of seeds or supply chains get disrupted, families who save their own seeds can keep planting regardless of outside circumstances. This independence matters enormously to the Amish worldview, which values self-sufficiency and community resilience over convenience. A gardener once lost his entire seed collection to mice in the garage and had to beg neighbors for enough to plant that spring, learning the hard way that dependence on stores means vulnerability. The Amish store their seeds in glass jars or paper envelopes kept in cool, dry locations where rodents can't reach them. Properly stored seeds of most vegetables remain viable for 3 to 5 years, though germination rates decline over time. This means you can build up a substantial seed bank that provides backup options if any particular year's harvest fails. The knowledge of how to save seeds properly gets passed down through generations, ensuring that younger family members learn these skills before they're needed. Understanding which plants are open-pollinated versus hybrid matters tremendously because hybrid seeds don't breed true, meaning the plants that grow from saved hybrid seeds won't match the parent plant. The Amish stick primarily with heirloom and open-pollinated varieties that reproduce reliably from saved seed. This preserves genetic diversity and keeps old varieties alive that might otherwise disappear from commercial catalogs. Some of these family seed lines have been maintained for over a century, representing irreplaceable genetic heritage. The practice connects modern Amish gardeners directly to their ancestors who brought these seeds to America generations ago. The emotional connection to these heritage seeds runs deep within Amish families, with certain varieties becoming synonymous with family identity and history. These aren't just seeds, they're living links to grandparents and great-grandparents who tended the same varieties decades earlier. Having endless free seeds solves one problem, but there's a timing trick that determines whether you eat fresh food for 2 weeks or 6 months. Planting an entire garden in one weekend might feel productive, but it guarantees you'll be overwhelmed with harvest later while going hungry at other times. The Amish plant in carefully timed batches that keep food coming in steady waves instead of one massive flood followed by nothing. Lettuce rows get planted every 2 weeks from early spring through fall, ensuring there are always heads ready to pick rather than 50 heads all maturing the same week. The same approach applies to beans, peas, radishes, and other quick-growing crops that can be succession planted. Somebody once planted 40 lettuce seedlings on the same day, then spent 2 weeks trying to eat salad for breakfast, lunch, and dinner before it all bolted in the heat. This staggered system stretches the fresh food supply for months without having to rely on storage methods too early in the season. Fresh food always tastes better than canned or frozen, so extending the harvest window means better eating and less processing work. The timing requires some planning because you need to know how long each crop takes from planting to harvest. Lettuce might mature in 45 to 60 days, beans in 50 to 70 days, and peas in 60 to 70 days, 70 days. By planting new rows every couple weeks, you create an overlapping schedule where something is always ready while something else is still growing and something else is just getting started. This turns the garden into a continuous production system rather than a one-time harvest event. The psychological benefit of constant harvest cannot be overstated. Walking into the garden and always finding something ready to pick creates a completely different relationship with food production than the boom and bust cycle of single planting dates. The steady supply eliminates the feast or famine mentality that plagues many gardeners who plant everything at once. There's satisfaction in picking fresh lettuce for dinner tonight while knowing more will be ready next week and the week after that. This reliability transforms the garden from a seasonal event into a permanent fixture of daily life. The Amish use their experience to time plantings around the local climate, knowing when late spring frosts end and when fall frosts typically begin. They squeeze maximum productivity from the growing season by keeping soil occupied constantly rather than leaving it empty between major plantings. When early spring peas finish producing, those same rows immediately get replanted with summer beans. When summer lettuce gets too hot and bolts, fall lettuce seedlings go in its place. The space never sits idle because idle space means lost food production. This continuous cropping requires planning ahead to have seedlings ready when space opens up. The Amish often start new transplants in small pots several weeks before they're needed. So when one crop finishes, the next generation is ready to go into the ground immediately. This approach also spreads out the work of harvesting and preserving food across many weeks instead of creating overwhelming bottlenecks where everything needs processing at once. One family harvested 300 pounds of tomatoes in a single week and spent every waking hour canning, swearing they'd never make that timing mistake again. The Amish prefer to can 20 jars this week, 20 jars next week, and 20 jars the week after, rather than facing 100 jars in one exhausting marathon session. Staggered planting makes this possible by spacing out when crops reach maturity. The mental and physical toll of marathon canning sessions versus manageable weekly sessions makes an enormous difference in whether food preservation feels sustainable or overwhelming. The method requires keeping good records of what got planted when, otherwise, you lose track of your schedule. Many Amish families use simple calendars or notebooks to track planting dates and expected harvest windows. Some even mark the garden itself with small tags showing when each section was planted. This record keeping serves double duty by providing historical data for future planning. Looking back at last year's notes reveals which planting dates worked best, which varieties performed well, and where adjustments might improve results. The accumulated knowledge from years of tracked plantings creates a customized growing guide perfectly tailored to the specific conditions of each garden. This attention to timing extends beyond just vegetables into other areas of food production as well. The principle of spreading out production applies universally to anything that grows or reproduces in cycles. Perfect planting schedules and endless harvests mean absolutely nothing without one critical ingredient that most people throw in the garbage. Every eggshell, coffee ground, vegetable peel, and weed clipping goes into compost bins rather than trash bags in Amish households. This practice transforms waste into the most valuable resource any garden can have, which is rich, living soil full of nutrients and beneficial organisms. Store-bought fertilizers cost money and often contain chemicals that build up in the soil over time, while compost provides everything plants need naturally. The Amish method means soil quality improves each year instead of declining like it does in gardens that rely on synthetic inputs. Some folks bag up their grass clippings and haul them to the dump, then drive to the garden center to buy bags of fertilizer, essentially throwing away what they need and buying what they could make. Composting isn't complicated, despite what some gardening books suggest with their complex recipes and precise carbon to nitrogen ratios. The basic formula is simple. Mix green materials like food scraps and fresh plant clippings with brown materials like dry leaves and straw, keep it damp but not soaking wet, and give it air by turning occasionally. Nature handles the rest through the work of bacteria, fungi, and countless other decomposers that break everything down into dark, crumbly compost. The Amish build simple bins from scrap lumber or just pile materials directly on the ground in out-of-the-way corners. The no-fuss approach to composting reflects the practical Amish mindset that values results over complicated processes. Their compost bins don't look fancy and they don't follow elaborate scientific formulas, but they consistently produce excellent finished compost year after year. Active compost piles heat up from the biological activity inside, sometimes reaching temperatures hot enough to kill weed seeds and disease organisms. This produces clean, safe compost that can go anywhere in the garden without introducing problems. The heat generation happens naturally when the right mix of materials and moisture creates ideal conditions for decomposer organisms. A properly working compost pile can reach internal temperatures of 130 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. hot enough that you can feel the heat radiating from the pile's surface. This biological furnace breaks down organic matter efficiently while sanitizing the finished product. The process takes anywhere from a few months to a year depending on materials, moisture, and how often you turn the pile. Finished compost smells earthy and pleasant rather than rotten, and it crumbles easily through your fingers. The Amish spread this black gold on garden beds before planting, mix it into potting soil, use it to top dress around growing plants, and even brew compost tea by soaking it in water to make liquid fertilizer. The improvement in plant health and productivity from good compost is remarkable and immediate. One gardener finally started composting after years of resistance and claimed his tomatoes the next season grew so big they needed their own zip code. Vegetables grown in compost-enriched soil taste better, produce more heavily, and resist diseases better than those grown in depleted dirt. The root systems develop more extensively in loose compost-rich soil, allowing plants to access water and nutrients more efficiently. The biological life within compost-rich soil creates benefits that synthetic fertilizers can never replicate. Beneficial bacteria, fungi, earthworms, and countless microscopic organisms thrive in compost-amended soil, creating a living ecosystem that supports plant health in ways we're only beginning to understand. These organisms break down organic matter into forms plants can absorb, protect roots from pathogens, improve soil structure, and even help plants withstand drought stress. The healthier and more productive your soil becomes, the less space you need to grow the same amount of food. This is how the Amish keep reducing the land requirements for feeding their families while simultaneously increasing yields. The practice costs absolutely nothing since it uses materials that would otherwise be discarded. Many Amish families run multiple compost bins at different stages, so they always have finished compost available when they need it for planting. The multi-bin system allows for continuous production because while one bin is being filled with fresh materials, another is decomposing, and a third holds finished compost ready for use. This rotation ensures compost availability throughout the entire growing season without gaps. Growing mountains of fresh food is impressive, but there's one preservation method that turns summer abundance into winter survival. Rows upon rows of glass jars line the shelves in Amish cellars, each one filled with tomatoes, pickles, fruits, meats, soups, and vegetables preserved at the peak of freshness. The Amish dedicate entire rooms to food storage, treating preservation as seriously as the growing itself, because one summer's work needs to feed the family through the next winter and beyond. Walking into these storage spaces feels like entering a private grocery store where every item came from the family's own land and labor. The canning process involves heating food in sealed jars to kill bacteria and create a vacuum seal that prevents spoilage for years. Properly processed jars can sit on shelves for 2 to 5 years without losing taste or nutrition, though most Amish families rotate through their supplies within a year. Some people pay premium prices for artisanal pickles in fancy stores. Meanwhile, Amish families have hundreds of jars they made for pennies each. The work happens during peak harvest season when vegetables and fruits arrive faster than anyone can eat them fresh. The timing creates natural urgency that motivates families to process food quickly while it's at peak quality, transforming what could be overwhelming abundance into preserved security. The Amish set up assembly line operations where multiple family members work together, some washing and cutting produce, others filling jars, someone managing the canner, and another labeling finished products. This teamwork turns an overwhelming job into an efficient process that preserves hundreds of pounds of food in a single day. The social aspect of canning creates bonding time where family members work side by side toward a common goal. Conversations flow naturally while hands stay busy, and the shared accomplishment of rows of filled jars creates satisfaction that solitary work never matches. The variety is staggering because nearly everything that grows can be canned somehow. Tomatoes become sauce, salsa, whole peeled tomatoes, and tomato juice. Cucumbers turn into dill pickles, bread and butter pickles, and relish. Fruits become jams, jellies, pie fillings, and whole canned fruits. Even meats get pressure canned into shelf-stable protein that needs no refrigeration. The Amish use both water bath canning for high-acid foods and pressure canning for low-acid foods. understanding that proper processing prevents dangerous bacteria like botulism. Each method requires specific temperatures and processing times that the Amish follow precisely because safety matters when you're feeding your family all year. The distinction between water bath and pressure canning relates directly to pH levels and bacterial growth. High-acid foods like tomatoes, fruits, and pickles can be safely processed in boiling water because the acid prevents botulism spores from developing. Low-acid foods like vegetables, meats, and soups require pressure canning that reaches higher temperatures necessary to kill botulism spores. One man decided canning instructions were just suggestions and ended up with enough exploded jars to understand why the Amish follow recipes exactly. Root cellaring complements canning for crops that store well without processing. Potatoes, carrots, beets, turnips, and winter squash go into cool, dark cellars where stable temperatures keep them fresh for months. Some Amish cellars maintain temperatures between 32 to 40 degrees Fahrenheit naturally through earth insulation and careful ventilation. The humidity levels in root cellars require management too, because different vegetables have different moisture needs. Potatoes and squash prefer drier conditions, while carrots and beets need higher humidity to prevent shriveling. The Amish often create separate storage areas within cellars to accommodate these different requirements. The combination of canned goods and cellared vegetables means the Amish rarely need to buy food during winter months. Every meal comes from jars opened that morning or vegetables pulled from storage bins. The financial savings are enormous because a family of 8 might spend hundreds of dollars weekly on groceries, but the Amish spend almost nothing beyond their initial seed and supply costs. The labor investment pays dividends throughout the year as each jar opened represents food security and independence from supply chains. The satisfaction of eating your own preserved food, knowing exactly where it came from and what went into it, adds value beyond mere dollars. The skill of preservation gets passed down through generations, with children learning young how to properly process and store food. This knowledge ensures the tradition continues and that every family member understands the work involved in food security. The equipment needed for canning remains simple and lasts decades with proper care. Basic water bath canners, pressure canners, jars, lids, and rings represent one-time investments that serve families for years. The initial equipment cost might seem significant, but amortized over decades of use becomes negligible compared to the ongoing cost of purchasing preserved foods from stores. All this preserved abundance creates an impressive stockpile. But there's one small creature that contributes more to daily nutrition than any amount of canned goods ever could. A small flock of laying hens provides the Amish with daily eggs and constant fertilizer without requiring much space or expensive feed. Even a dozen chickens produce enough eggs for a large family while simultaneously enriching garden soil with their nitrogen-rich manure. The Amish let their birds roam freely through gardens after harvest season, where the chickens scratch through crop residue hunting for bugs, weed seeds, and leftover vegetables. This natural pest control eliminates insects that would otherwise overwinter and attack next year's crops. The chickens get free food from garden waste and insects, while the garden gets free fertilization and pest removal. Some people spend money on commercial pest control and fertilizer while shooing chickens away from their gardens, missing the point entirely. Feed costs stay remarkably low because chickens eat kitchen scraps, garden trimmings, and whatever bugs they find while foraging. The Amish supplement with grain during winter when foraging opportunities decrease, but even then the costs remain minimal compared to buying eggs at stores. A hen produces roughly 250 to 300 eggs per year during her prime laying years, meaning a dozen hens deliver 3,000 eggs annually. That's enough to feed a large family with surplus for baking, trading, or selling. The math becomes even more impressive when you calculate the retail value of 3,000 eggs compared to the cost of feeding a dozen chickens. The economic advantage of chicken keeping extends beyond just egg production into fertilizer value, pest control services, and entertainment. The initial investment in chickens and a simple coop pays for itself within months through egg production alone. The manure becomes equally valuable because chicken droppings contain high levels of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that plants need for growth. Fresh chicken manure is too strong to apply directly to plants because it can burn roots, so the Amish compost it first or age it for several months before spreading it on garden beds. A small flock produces several wheelbarrows of manure monthly, eliminating the need to purchase commercial fertilizers. The nutrient density of chicken manure surpasses most other animal manures, making it particularly valuable for intensive vegetable production. Properly aged or composted chicken manure becomes garden gold that transforms plant health and productivity. The chickens also provide meat when hens stop laying productively after 2 to 3 years. Rather than keeping non-productive birds, the Amish process older hens into soup or canned meat, completing the cycle of usefulness. A neighbor once complained that chickens were too much work for too little reward, then spent more time driving to the store for eggs than the Amish spent tending their entire flock all week. The simplicity of chicken keeping makes it accessible even for people with limited space. A dozen hens need roughly 30 to 40 square feet of coop space plus outdoor run area. Many urban and suburban areas now allow small backyard flocks, meaning even city dwellers can replicate this part of Amish food production. The birds provide entertainment and education for children while teaching responsibility and animal husbandry skills. Eggs collected warm from nests taste dramatically better than store-bought eggs that might be weeks old. The deep orange yolks from properly fed free-range hens indicate superior nutrition compared to pale yellow yolks from factory farm eggs. The richness of these eggs improves everything from scrambled eggs to baked goods, with cakes rising higher and custard setting firmer. The nutritional superiority of fresh eggs from pastured hens shows up in vitamin content, omega-3 fatty acid levels, and overall flavor. Once you've tasted truly fresh eggs from well-fed chickens, store-bought eggs seem like pale imitations. Chicken keeping demonstrates how small livestock can contribute enormously to household food security without requiring extensive land or resources. The daily interaction with chickens also creates a connection to food production that most modern people never experience. Children who gather eggs each morning understand where food comes from in ways that grocery store shoppers never will. But even with chickens providing daily essentials and gardens producing abundantly, no family can make everything they need completely alone. No Amish family attempts to grow every type of food they consume because specialization and trading create better outcomes for everyone involved. One family might excel at growing onions due to their particular soil conditions and experience, while their neighbors focus on corn or honey or dairy products. The Amish trade surplus production among themselves, creating a community-wide food system that functions like a farmer's market without money changing hands. This cooperative approach means each family can focus on what they grow best, rather than spreading effort across dozens of different crops. The system works because everyone produces something of value that others need. A family with abundant apple trees trades fresh apples and cider for vegetables they don't grow themselves. Beekeepers exchange honey for grain or meat. Dairy families trade milk, butter, and cheese for produce and eggs. Some people drive past 3 grocery stores to reach the 4th one with better prices, while the Amish just walk next door and swap a basket of tomatoes for a jar of honey. This trading network extends beyond just food to include seeds, livestock, tools, and labor. The flexibility of the system allows trades to happen across different timescales, with immediate exchanges of fresh produce balanced against long-term reciprocity of labor and services. A farmer who saved exceptional bean seeds might trade some to neighbors in exchange for help with barn repairs or assistance during harvest. The connections strengthen community bonds while ensuring everyone's needs get met through mutual support. The informal economy created through trading builds social fabric in ways that monetary transactions never can. The practice eliminates dependence on outside supply chains that can fail during economic downturns, natural disasters, or other disruptions. When stores run short on certain items or prices spike dramatically, the Amish continue eating well because their food comes from known neighbors rather than distant suppliers. This resilience shows its value during times of economic uncertainty when cash becomes scarce but trading continues uninterrupted. The independence from market fluctuations and supply disruptions provides security that money in the bank cannot match. The trading system also prevents waste because surplus production always finds someone who needs it. A family with more eggs than they can use trades extras to neighbors before they spoil. Someone who canned more tomatoes than necessary exchanges jars for canned peaches from an orchard family. Nothing gets thrown away when it can be traded for something useful. The relationships built through this trading create social capital that extends beyond mere transactions. Families who trade regularly develop trust and friendship that carry over into other areas of life. They help each other during emergencies, share knowledge and skills, and support one another through difficult times. This social cohesion makes communities more resilient and self-sufficient overall. The modern economy emphasizes individual purchasing power and independence, but the Amish demonstrate that interdependence within a community actually provides greater security than isolated self-sufficiency. No single family can do everything well, but a connected community possesses all the skills and resources needed for prosperity. The diversity of specializations within the community creates abundance that isolated families could never achieve alone. One family's weakness becomes another family's strength, and through trading, these strengths get shared across the entire community. The trading arrangements happen informally through conversations and mutual understanding rather than formal contracts or complicated negotiations. People know what their neighbors produce and what they need, making trade straightforward and fair. One woman tried keeping a spreadsheet to track the exact value of every trade with neighbors, then realized she was spending more time on accounting than the Amish spent on actual trading all month. The generosity within these systems often means people give more than they receive, trusting that the balance evens out over time and through different seasons. A neighbor who needs help during illness receives food and support freely, knowing they've given the same to others in the past and will again in the future. This gift economy strengthens bonds that money-based transactions can never create. The beauty of the system lies in its flexibility and human scale, where relationships matter more than receipts and trust replaces contracts. Trading solves the variety problem beautifully, but having abundant food from multiple sources creates a different challenge that requires careful attention. The Amish approach food storage with military precision, rotating supplies carefully so the oldest jars get used first and nothing expires before consumption. Each preserved jar gets labeled with contents and date, then positioned on shelves according to age. When someone needs tomatoes for cooking, they grab the oldest jar rather than the newest, ensuring steady rotation through the entire inventory. This first in first out system prevents waste from forgotten jars hiding in dark corners until they spoil. Root vegetables stored in underground cellars require similar attention because even though they keep for months, they won't last forever without proper monitoring. Carrots, beets, turnips, and parsnips get layered in damp sawdust or sand inside bins or barrels. The moisture prevents shriveling while the sawdust keeps vegetables from touching each other and spreading rot. The Amish check stored roots regularly, removing any that show signs of decay before they contaminate neighbors. Some people organize their pantries by color for the aesthetics, while the Amish organize by date because pretty arrangements don't prevent food waste. Temperature management makes or breaks long-term storage success. Root cellars work because they maintain cool, stable temperatures just above freezing without the expense of refrigeration. The earth itself provides insulation against extreme outside temperatures, whether summer heat or winter cold. Proper cellar design includes ventilation to prevent excess humidity that causes mold and allows some air circulation to carry away gases that vegetables release as they respire. The ventilation system typically involves two openings at different heights, creating natural airflow through temperature differentials. Cold air enters low while warm air exits high, maintaining consistent conditions without mechanical systems. This passive climate control costs nothing to operate and never fails due to power outages. Some Amish cellars hold enough food to feed large families for 6 months or more without any additional shopping. Walking into these spaces reveals the results of a full year's labor preserved in rows of jars and bins of vegetables. The abundance provides security and peace of mind that no amount of money in the bank can match. The visual impact of seeing months' worth of food stacked neatly creates confidence in the family's ability to weather any crisis. The organization extends beyond just rotation to include inventory management. The Amish know exactly how much food they have stored at any time, allowing them to plan meals and ensure nothing runs out unexpectedly. If green beans are running low in January, they know to ration them carefully until spring planting can replenish supplies. This awareness prevents the panic of discovering empty shelves with months remaining until the next harvest. The mental accounting of stored food becomes second nature to experienced Amish homemakers who can walk through their cellars and instantly assess whether supplies will last through winter. They notice when certain items deplete faster than expected and adjust meal planning accordingly. This running inventory exists entirely in their heads through constant awareness rather than written lists. The storage areas themselves require maintenance to remain functional. The Amish clean and air out cellars annually, removing any spoiled material and checking for pest intrusions. Proper housekeeping prevents problems that could compromise entire storage inventories. The cool, dark conditions that preserve vegetables also appeal to mice and rats, so the Amish take precautions against rodent damage through careful construction and monitoring. Wire mesh screens cover ventilation openings, and any cracks or gaps get sealed to prevent entry. Glass jars need inspection too, because even properly canned goods can fail if seals break or jars crack. The Amish check stored jars periodically, looking for signs of spoilage like bulging lids, leaking seals, or unexpected color changes. Any suspicious jars get discarded immediately rather than risked. A family once ignored a bulging jar lid because they didn't want to waste the food inside, and the resulting mess when it exploded convinced them the Amish approach of discarding questionable jars makes perfect sense. This vigilance ensures the family eats only safe, properly preserved food throughout the year. The inspection routine happens naturally as jars get retrieved for use. Each trip to the cellar includes a quick visual scan of surrounding jars for any problems. The rotation system combined with proper storage conditions means the Amish waste almost nothing while maintaining variety and nutrition through every season. Many families keep detailed records of what they store each year, noting which crops produced well and which preservation methods worked best. This information guides planning for future seasons, creating continuous improvement in their food systems. The discipline required for proper rotation might seem tedious, but it becomes routine when everyone understands that carelessness means wasted food and potential hunger. Children learn these systems young, understanding that food security depends on careful management of stored resources. The habits formed through childhood practice persist throughout life, ensuring knowledge transfer across generations. Months of stored food provide incredible security, but there's one type of fresh nutrition that even the best cellar can't preserve. Fresh spinach, lettuce, and herbs grow on Amish windowsills throughout the coldest months when outdoor gardens lie frozen and dormant. The practice ensures fresh greens for every meal, even when snow covers the ground outside and temperatures plunge below zero. South-facing windows provide the maximum available sunlight during winter's short days, giving plants enough light energy for growth despite reduced intensity. The Amish position clay pots on wide windowsills or build simple shelving that maximizes window exposure. The same warm brick method used outdoors works indoors too, with heated bricks placed beneath plant trays to provide bottom warmth that encourages root growth. Room temperature air keeps the plants from freezing, while the brick warmth creates ideal root zone conditions. Some people pay premium prices for out-of-season greens shipped from across the country, while the Amish pick fresh lettuce from their kitchen window during snowstorms. The crop selection focuses on fast-growing greens that tolerate lower light conditions reasonably well. The compact growth habit of these crops also makes them ideal for container culture where space is limited and every square inch of windowsill matters. Leaf lettuce matures in 30 to 45 days, even with limited winter sunlight. Spinach grows steadily in cool conditions that would slow other crops. Herbs like parsley, chives, and cilantro provide fresh flavoring for winter meals. These plants don't require full summer sun intensity to produce usable harvests, making them ideal for winter windowsill growing. The adaptation of these crops to lower light comes from their natural growing patterns, where they often grow in partial shade or during spring and fall when sun angles are lower. The continuous harvest approach works indoors just like it does outside. Rather than planting everything at once, the Amish start new pots every week or two, ensuring something is always ready to harvest while something else is still growing. This succession planting provides steady supplies of fresh greens rather than overwhelming abundance followed by nothing. Container selection matters because drainage and soil volume affect plant health significantly. The Amish use clay pots when possible because they breathe better than plastic, allowing air exchange through porous walls. Proper drainage holes prevent waterlogged soil that causes root rot in indoor conditions. The soil itself needs to be rich and loose, typically a mix of compost and garden soil that provides nutrients while draining well. The ratio generally runs about 50-50 compost to soil, creating medium that holds moisture without becoming waterlogged. Watering indoor plants requires more attention than outdoor gardens because containers dry out faster in heated homes. The Amish check soil moisture daily, watering when the top inch feels dry to the touch. They use room temperature water rather than cold tap water that shocks plant roots. The warm brick heating helps by keeping soil slightly warmer, which increases plant metabolism and water uptake. Indoor growing eliminates many outdoor gardening challenges like weeds, most pests, and weather damage, but it introduces different concerns like limited light and dry indoor air. The Amish address low humidity by grouping plants together so they create their own microclimate through transpiration. They also avoid placing plants near heating vents that blow dry air directly on leaves. One household tried growing winter greens next to a heating vent for the warmth, then wondered why everything shriveled up faster than autumn leaves in October. The positioning of plants near windows requires consideration of cold drafts from poorly insulated glass. The Amish often place plants close enough to receive light, but far enough from glass to avoid cold spots. Simple curtains pulled at night provide additional insulation between plants and cold windows. This low-tech indoor farming keeps the family diet balanced year-round with fresh, vitamin-rich greens that would otherwise be unavailable during winter months. The practice proves that even apartment dwellers or people with no outdoor space can produce meaningful amounts of fresh food using nothing more than sunny windows and basic containers. The vitamin content of fresh greens matters tremendously during winter when immune systems face their greatest challenges from cold and flu season. Fresh lettuce and spinach provide vitamins A, C, and K, along with folate and iron that support health when fresh outdoor produce isn't available. The Amish understand that proper nutrition throughout winter keeps families healthier and more productive. The psychological benefit of tending growing plants during bleak winter months shouldn't be underestimated either. The green living plants and daily harvest routines provide connection to nature and growing cycles even when everything outside lies dormant. This continuity of gardening activity maintains skills and knowledge that might otherwise grow rusty during long winters. The combination of canned goods, cellared roots, and fresh windowsill greens creates a complete food system that functions year-round on remarkably little land, demonstrating how the Amish turn an eighth of an acre into abundance that most people couldn't achieve with 10 times the space. The integration of these different preservation and production methods creates redundancy and security. If one method fails, others provide backup. If canned tomatoes run out early, fresh greens and cellared potatoes continue providing nutrition. This diversified approach to food security mirrors investment strategies that spread risk across multiple assets. The Amish have already mastered what the rest of the world is only now beginning to fear: how to feed a family without depending on stores, fuel, or fragile supply chains. On just 1/8 of an acre, they grow enough to stay full through every season, every crisis, every blackout.